Hello, guys, and welcome back to our first community call for Enzyme Finance for 2021. And actually, this is our first community call for Enzyme itself because, as you guys know, Enzyme used to be called Melon Protocol up until last year in 2020 when we officially rebranded to Enzyme, which really marks a whole different chapter for this project, which has been one of the oldest projects, not just in DeFi, but in crypto in general, starting as early as 2016, tackling on-chain asset management. And this is a really big step in the road for the project because not only are we doing reprint, not only is it getting a fresh face and whole new name, but also, as most of you are familiar, most likely, is that Enzyme launched version 2 just this month, which unleashes a whole new set of features, unlocks a lot of doors that really allow Enzyme to scale and become the leader that it's meant to be in the on-chain asset management space. So without further ado, today's is getting hosted by myself and GL. As you guys may know, the two of us are the the Melon Exposed Business representatives. Now, as I guess, Enzyme Exposed Businesses representatives, meaning users of the protocol elected us to help represent them, to get their feedback and make sure it gets integrated. And as a result, we're part of the Melon Council, the Enzyme Council, where we help the governance process. So anytime for situations like this, where we present to the community, you will usually see the two of us. So we will be kicking this off, but Mona is joining us, will be joining us on this call as well, and share quite a few insights about features and the road ahead. So I hope you guys look forward to being here. And if you have any questions, we will be doing a Q&A session at the end, but also feel free to chime in once in a while in the chat in case maybe we don't explain something in enough detail or you want us to back up over it, okay? So without further ado, let's get going. Slide number 2. There we go. So in today's call, we're going to talk about a few things, okay? First of all, we start really quickly, briefly cover the ground for those that are brand new here. What is Enzyme in the first place? And then I'll go over some of the network stats for version 2 because we've had quite the explosive growth already in week 1 for version 2. Literally pretty much bringing on as much TVL as version 1 had at its peak, which is fascinating. And as you'll see later in this call, the biggest partnerships, the biggest, I guess, TVL increases, they're yet to come. So it's very promising, the start we've had so far. Then GL and I will together do a quick demo of the actual platform, right? So instead of talking and having, screenshots of the features, we'll just walk through the actual platform and show you all the cool things you can do, from setting up the fund to showing the integrations that we now have, from synthetic assets to lending to liquidity pools. Literally anything that you can do in DeFi essentially is now possible on Enzyme. Of course, that's a little hyperbole. We're adding more and more features, but that's the goal essentially, that Enzyme becomes this mega aggregator of all DeFi products that you really, whatever your heart desires to do in DeFi, you can do through an Enzyme fund, okay? And then what's next for Melon? At that point, Mona should be joining us. She's going to give you a little bit of a breakdown of, where the road leads us to next and what will be the focus, both for scaling and also in terms of features. And I think GL will then go over some of the new features that have been requested that will be added post version 2, meaning now that we've always been talking about version 2 for the last perhaps 6 months. It was always this big milestone to be reached. It's here now, it's live. So of course we want to see what comes next. What is the team and the council focusing on most now to make sure we roll the features out that you guys actually want, because that's JL and I's job, is to represent you. So if you guys say, hey, we really care about an integration with, say, Alpha, or an integration with Balancer, or whatever it is, let us know. We have to, even the setup with Canny for it, where you guys can tell us what it is, and we'll get that done. And then last but not least, we'll have a Q&A where whatever you guys want to talk about Enzyme, whether it's the growth, the integrations, how working with the fund goes, or some bugs or whatever, always happy to hear. So let's get right into it. Perfect. Okay, so what is Enzyme? Okay, for those that are brand new that have never heard of Enzyme, I'll keep it brief because I think most in here maybe already have Enzyme funds, are invested in Enzyme, or no. But the basics is this: Enzyme is the on-chain asset management protocol. Right? What does that mean? That means in the traditional world, there's venture funds, there's hedge funds, there's mutual funds, there's all these different financial vehicles. The goal of Enzyme is to bring that on chain, that every single fund in some way, shape, or form, and even partially individual investors run their portfolios on Enzyme and use it as the asset management layer, so to say. The benefit of that is twofold for both sides of the spectrum. You've always got investors and you've got fund managers. So from the investor perspective, the benefit of having an asset management protocol is that it makes the track record much more transparent and believable, because as we know, in the world of finance, whether it's from the Bernie Madoffs or the 1MDB scandal and so forth, even the biggest auditing firms, you just never know the truth 100%. But by having it on chain, the blockchain doesn't lie, right? So for investors, having the funds you invest in be on chain ensures full transparency, where you can literally look at the vault and know what is there. So we increase transparency, we increase really creating a layer for track records. Furthermore, it's available 24/7, right? We know that banks and traditional funds, etc., a lot of the traditional finance world just shuts down on the weekends. And of course, we know and love crypto for the fact that it's 24/7, although it can be stressful. And what that adds to it is that, the accounting, your balances and your ability to redeem and add and so forth is also always there 24/7, right? Enzyme never shuts down because it's code. It's not a company. And last but not least, of course, it's transparent and non-custodial, which is huge, because one of the big problems, just like transparency with investing in funds, is that what if the fund manager runs off, especially in crypto, where you know that not your keys, not your crypto. If you send money to, let's say, we always see this, on social media, somebody says, oh, send me 1 Bitcoin, I'll send you 2 Bitcoin back. Of course, we don't believe, because those are clear scams. But the idea is that even if there's a trustworthy fund and they make you send the money, you give the custody over to them. What Enzyme ensures is that if you invest in a fund, they don't actually have withdrawal privileges. They only have trading privileges, right? So that way the fund manager gets to trade and invest, which is their job for you, right? But they can't redeem it. That way we protect investors the best we can, allowing them to have full transparency, and at the same time making sure that their assets are only being used for what they're supposed to be used for. And that in itself is solving two of the biggest problems in traditional finance. Okay. Now, from the fund manager's perspective, let's switch the tables real quick. If you're a fund manager, it has so many benefits. First of all, now with version 2, it's incredibly fast and incredibly cheap. I set up 4 funds on Enzyme version 2 by now, and it cost me perhaps $45 on average. $45 to set up an entire decentralized hedge fund, which if you try to do this in the traditional world will cost you at least $20,000 setup fee. And then you have annual recurring costs of perhaps $40,000, $50,000 a year minimum, right? Because what Enzyme really does is it takes care of the setup, it takes care of the accounting, the admin, partially the audit, because everything is on chain. So it really replaces a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And it's now so fast that it's done with one single transaction. Whereas if you ever had a Melon version 1 account, it took, I think, 5 transactions, right, which had a lot of gas fees. Now we've structured in a way where you set up all the info and you do one single Ethereum transaction and it's done. The second cool part about version 2 now and about Enzyme in general is the DeFi integrations. And that's where Enzyme really stands on itself, even if you don't use it to raise capital from investors, because it becomes this mega aggregator of all DeFi tools. Already now with version 2, you can use Paraswap, which is one of the leading aggregators for liquidity. You can use Uniswap. You can lend out on Compound. You can provide liquidity on Uniswap. You can trade synthetic assets like synthetic oil, synthetic gold, the Nikkei, etc. on synthetics. And we're always expanding that, right? So already now we offer a lot of different DeFi tools all in one single beautiful dashboard, which really changes things. And now also what it offers is just like scale, because previously one of the biggest concerns we had from potential users was that there was a very limited asset universe. Perhaps, I think it was like 22 assets at the time. Now there's over 100 tokens. And later on, I think it's GL that will explain how you can add new tokens. So if you say, hey, I really want to trade this token, how can that happen? right? So there's now a direct, clear path how you can add assets to the Enzyme universe, which will be the goal, that there will be as many as possible so that you can trade. Our goal really is here for you to be able to trade exactly the way you would outside of Enzyme, but on Enzyme, with the extra benefits of having a clear track record, a great UI, being able to have higher levels of security, because now we also features like, for example, having delegated trading accounts and so forth. So it's super exciting. And with that, before I talk anymore, let's just, I think, do a demo. I think that's up next.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the nice introduction, Felix.
Oh, wait, there's one more real quick. I forgot there's one more quick slide. But that's a quick one. Just a quick look at the stats, right? I think at the peak, Enzyme, back then was still Melon, had about 5.5 million TVL on DeFi pools. Already now, literally 1 week after launch, there's $4.7 million in TVL on version 2, while there's still also 1.2 million on version 1. So it's doing growing incredibly fast. Already 135 funds, already 150 investments. So in 1 week, we pretty much almost caught up to what version 1 did in its lifetime. And some of the biggest partnerships are yet coming up, which are being talked about later on. So awesome growth. And any of you have not set up a fund, and after this you're curious, always feel free to reach out to me or GL about how to go about it, or if you need any support, because we're here to help. Now to you, I think.
Yes, let me share my screen. Let me grab the right tab.
Do I need to stop sharing first? No, perfect.
No, this should work. Okay, so let me go to the homepage first. So if you go to enzyme.finance, you can find some more information on like what the protocol does, with what it integrates, etc. If you want to start trading or like investing, you can click on Launch App, which will bring you to the current leaderboard. So if you're an investor, you go to the tab for investors. And here you can filter the different funds. For instance, I only want the fund that's denominated in Ether with a positive performance. So you can say, hey, this one looks interesting. I want to invest in this one. I'll quickly go to another tab on the Coven testnet, where we can do the same thing. You can check for a fund that's performing well, for instance, one that has Ether as a denomination. Let me grab this one. So if you click on it, you will see all the stats, for instance, the share price, how many assets are under management. And so just to be clear, this is like a fake fund. I created it on a Coven testnet, which means it's not the live Ethereum net. So it's with play money, so you can test it out and see how it works. But basically, it shows all the different assets that are in the fund. Some description that's made by the fund manager, all the financials, a lot of details for the fees, previous investors, etc. But let's say I just want to join this fund. I click on invest. I choose the amount I want to invest. So let's say 2 Bitcoin. I read the terms and agree to it. And this will prompt me to buy shares. Like you can even choose a different gas speed to get the transaction done faster, but this should be fine. Let me confirm it in MetaMask. So here in the bottom right, you will see that the transaction is pending. If you go to Etherscan, it will give you more detail. But there we go. Transaction complete. So I now have shares in this fund. If I want to see my investments, I go back to like the main page, click on my investments, and here I can see like both a list and a graph of all the funds I invested in. So like I invested in some before, you can see your performance, your investment history, and all that good stuff. You can also like keep track on what your funds are doing. So if you invested in this one, you can look at the share price, what's it doing. You can also change your currency you're looking at. So let's say I'm only interested in looking at it versus Ether, or for instance, versus Euro. And so basically that's it. It's really easy. You can keep track of it. So let's have a look what you should do if you want to create your fund. So if you want to create a new fund, just click this button. You choose the denomination asset and a name, of course. So let's say community funds. You can choose a denomination asset. If you don't know what it means, there are these little tooltips. So for instance, here it says that it will determine the assets in which the share price and the performance are measured. So it's basically benchmarking the performance against DAI or any of the other supported assets in here. One thing what's important to consider is that investors will need to pay in this currency to enter the fund for now. There are changes coming that might be possible to also enter with any asset, but for now, they enter with the denomination one. There you have multiple options for the fee. So you can, for instance, charge a performance fee, you can change these numbers, and management fees. For the performance fee, you can also choose in which period it is counted. So let me just go to the next option. You also have the option to whitelist certain addresses to invest in the fund. If you, for instance, want to do KYC on your investors, you can also limit the amounts that are investable. So let's say we want people at least doing 0.1 ETH and like a maximum of 100. And then there are some more advanced settings you normally shouldn't change. You can always come back to them later. There are some things which are permanent, but for instance, like these investment limits can be changed later, the whitelisting can be changed, etc. So once you're happy with all the settings, you just click on Create Fund, on Submit. So for instance, now at the current gas prices of about like 75 gigaway, you will pay about 77 euros, so $80 to create a fund. Of course, at times when gas is cheaper, it will also be cheaper to create your fund. So the transaction is being processed. This is all being done live on Kovan testnet. So there we go. You're ready to start adding assets to your fund. So we just go to the page of the one we just created. It doesn't have any investments yet. So let's add some Ether. For instance, 2 Ether. We accept the conditions. I will first need to allow Enzyme to approve. Well, I need to approve Enzyme to spend my Ether. So it's actually 2 transactions in MetaMask. I'm not sure if you can see that also. Let me do this again. As you can see also, like investing in a fund is a lot cheaper than creating a fund. So as soon as this transaction is processed, we can start like trading and swapping. So for instance, I already have like the 1 Ether now deposited. Let's say I want to swap it on Uniswap for, I don't know, YFI, for instance. We again have the transaction. For this, we don't have to do an approved transaction. So it's just like 1 transaction and you're good to go. Yeah, and it's complete. So Normally, it can take a few minutes to update. For instance, it doesn't show the price yet, but this will happen in like a few seconds or a minute. So we see indeed we swapped the Ether for YFI in this instance. It's not the only thing you can do. You can also provide liquidity, for instance, to Uniswap. This is not enabled in the testnet version, but it is supported in the main app. And you can also lend out your assets. So for instance, if you have like any of these, you can just click on lend and it will deposit it into Compound and you will earn a nice interest rate without taking any additional steps or additional risk. You can also like change the rules of your funds and go into the settings to like type a description of your trading strategy or a description of yourself, your contact details, so potential investors can reach out to you. You can choose like the type of strategies you would like to undertake, for instance, like yield farming or indicating you only long assets and you don't short. And there's some more advanced options, but I think this should give you a nice overview of what is possible. So this is like the Kovan testnet version. It will also be made available publicly once there's a faucet, so you can test it out for yourself. But the main app is already live, so you can immediately start investing into existing funds. Okay, I think we can bring it back to the presentation now. And just
GL,
to make
since
it
you're
clear,
host, you can share the presentation.
Okay, let me grab it.
Do you have it on any?
Yeah, it's not full screen.
Perfect.
But this should work. Okay, I'm not sure if Mona already arrived.
She did comment that we did a good job in the Discord, so I think she might be.
Yeah, I'm here, guys.
Okay.
Hi.
Perfect. So we now hand over the word to Mona, which is the CEO of Avant-Garde Finance, basically the lead developer behind Enzyme.
Hey guys, so yeah, great to be here. Thanks Felix and Gilles for the great presentations. I already DM'd you about that, but they're looking great and nice demo. So I think I was asked to talk about what's next. So, you know, as you guys know, the team have done a great job in the last 9 months putting V2 together. And I think now is actually, you know, it's only been on mainnet for a week, and now is actually the time when we're sort of fixing, you know, any kind of, dealing with kind of all the new users and basically taking in additional feedback that has come through and implementing some of that feedback. But really, it's time now to set the roadmap for the next 3 to 6 months. And rather than just set it completely on our own this time around, I think we definitely want to hear from the community. I think that the 3-year roadmap that we originally put forward to the Enzyme Council a year, and it's been nearly a year and a half ago, is starting to look a little bit outdated with all the, you know, awesome stuff that's happening in DeFi right now. We're just seeing an explosion in really exciting things like perpetual tokens or you know, the different kinds of way you can take leverage, the different kinds of pools, whether it's curve pools or, you know, balancer pools. And we basically want to hear from you guys this time around in terms of what you want from us. So there are a couple of things, however, that are things that we have to implement and are things that we have planned to implement. And the first and most important thing is what used to be known as MIP7 before we rebranded, and now we refer to it as NZIP7. And basically, that's the overhaul of the MLN tokenomics. And basically, the idea there, for those of you who are not familiar with this proposal, like in very simple terms, the idea was to remove this idea of having a setup fee so that we can lower barriers to entry as much as possible. And basically switch to a more AUM-based model. And the proposal was originally kind of put forward by Tom Shaughnessy and Ceteris Paribus and Chris Meneses from Moonchain Capital. The three of them did a lot of fundamental work and modeling around that. And the council has been discussing this. There is a kind of tokenomics working group within the council that have been discussing this back and forth. And generally speaking, most of the large ideas within the proposal have been agreed on. And now it's really down to the implementation. Because our team has been really focused on V2 until now, we haven't really spent too much time on the implementation, but that work will start in literally exactly a week and a half from now. And that's probably going to be one of the major priorities for the next 2 to 3 months, as well as the next thing on the slide, which is basically completing the Rari adapter. So some of you will have seen just before Christmas, we announced a partnership with Rari Capital. So for those of you who are not familiar with Rari, they offer they've started off with yield-bearing products, but they're branching out into lots of other exciting DeFi and even some non-DeFi stuff in the future that will be very exciting. And we've decided to partner up in a way that we have always been very, very infrastructure focused, and we want to be able to power any kind of product and any kind of investment product on top of Enzyme. And that ranges from, what most people know us for is active management, but also, indices and robo advisory, artificial intelligence, and strategies like Rari. So we believe we have an infrastructure which is, especially V2, is built in such a modular and extensible way that we can accommodate for all of these kinds of use cases. And Rari will be one of the first demonstrations of that when we complete this adapter and migrate the Rari strategies over to Enzyme. And what this is really, what I get really excited about for this is really a lot of projects in the space are trying to build asset management infrastructure and asset management product at the same time. And I think one of the ways we really differentiate ourselves is that we only aim to be infrastructure. And we've been doing it for nearly 4.5 years now. And if there's one thing we've learned is that focusing on just infrastructure is challenging enough. And so I can't imagine what it must be like trying to do infrastructure plus product really well. I think it's great for teams to have a focus, and I think that this partnership will allow Rari to focus much more on their product and their strategies, and making sure they outperform and free them up from all the day-to-day maintenance, from integration work, audits, even the cost and time of that. And we're excited for that and much more similar type partnerships to come. Another really exciting integration that we're working on is with Unslashed Finance. So Unslashed Finance will be, some of you might have seen that they went to mainnet in a private capacity last week, and they've been they've been doing two things. They've been allowing people to deposit into the Spartan bucket, which is basically a really cool and unique product in DeFi, because it allows people to underwrite insurance on a basket of products, which is much less risky than underwriting insurance on a single protocol. So if there is a hack, you don't lose everything to pay out the person who got hacked, but instead there's 25 protocols, if I remember correctly, that are in the Spartan bucket. So if one of them gets hacked, roughly speaking, I can't remember the exact allocation, you only lose like 1/25 or whatever of that portfolio. But like any other insurance product, that collateral is there for to pay out potential insurance claims. And it's just sitting there right now doing nothing. So we're exploring ways on how that can earn yields through some of the Enzyme tools. So that's a really exciting product that lasts. And on the flip side of that, we've seen Unslashed starting to sell insurance in some protocols. I think they've sold for $50 million in 1 week of insurance on 4 different protocols. And of course, we'll be working with them closely to make sure that we get a good insurance solution out there for Enzyme users as well. So that's also on our radar. And I'm just going to mention a couple of minor things that are not on that slide as well. We're exploring ways to bring staked ETH to Enzyme as well. And this is really exciting because, I mean, if managers can access staked ETH instead of ETH, then automatically they have an edge over funds that are just holding ETH. Obviously, there are some risks involved with holding staked ETH, but it's up to the manager to risk assess that. But we think that's a really exciting asset to have in the universe. And also, we've been listening to a lot of the community feedback the last few days since we launched V2. I'd love to hear your feedback at the end of this session as well. But tokens that we've been getting a lot of demand for include GRT, 1inch, MIR, Hedgic, DPI, and Sushi. And we're basically working on rolling out those tokens within the asset universe, hopefully within days. So yeah, that's kind of most of the stuff I was going to talk about. As I said, in a week and a half, the team will meet virtually, as we used to, as we usually do it in person, but and set the new. We will spend a week researching a lot of DeFi protocols. So if there's new features or new protocols that you would like to see integrated into Enzyme in the next 3 to 6 months, now is the time to say, because we'll spend that week to week and a half, like basically immersing ourselves into some of these protocols, and then deciding based on the user feedback we get and based on the complexity and the other things we have to do. Basically, I saw someone say Alpha Homora. We've been looking at that one actually. And basically, yeah, we'll basically set our roadmap, and we'll probably publicize it this time because we don't usually do that. And obviously, we'll be speaking to the Enzyme Council, sorry, not Melon Council, about this, because I think it will involve swapping some things out that are starting to look a little bit outdated on the original roadmap we had proposed to them. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it from my side. I don't know, Gilles and Felix, if it's better to take questions or feedback right now or at the end. I think it was planned at the end, right?
Yeah, we'll do it at the end. We also go over some of the features now that have been requested. Perfect. It's nice to see some of them already mentioned. Yeah. I'll quickly remove the image. Yeah. Okay. So indeed, we have the ability. Yeah, let me cancel this. Yeah, so there is enzyme.canny.io, which is a website where you can add your suggestions. So indeed, if you have like a DeFi platform you would like to see integrated or some other items, you can make a suggestion there. You can also vote on the other people's suggestions. So If you want to see something added and it's already in the list, just give it an upvote and it will be brought to the attention of the developers. So some of the common features that were requested, well, number one is basically more tokens. We see a lot of people want the ability to invest in more tokens, including one of the main DeFi tokens right now, which is Sushi or DPI or Hedgig. Good news for these three is that there is a Chainlink Oracle available since recently for them, which makes it quite easy to add to Enzyme, if I'm not mistaken, Mona. So these should be able to be added in a recent time period. There are some more tokens we noticed that have a lot of requests, including 1-inch alpha Mir from Mirror protocol, GRT from the Graph. These don't all have an Oracle yet, but they could be included in the future too. And if you want to see one of these, make sure to upvote them in the Kenny. There's also a bunch of staked assets that look interesting to increase the yield. For instance, staked ETH, which would mean you get interest on your Ether that is derived from staking it in the E2.0 contract through some semi-custodial or non-custodial solutions that will be offered. But the big advantage is that you still have liquid ETH you can use in other DeFi protocols and trade with. And there's also some rebasing tokens like Ampleford and DIC and other ones like that that were brought to our attention. One big feature request is the ability to be able to rebalance a portfolio with one click. Because right now, when an investor joins a fund, he will just deposit the denomination asset. So the manager still needs to manually trade it into the appropriate allocations that he feels comfortable with. So one thing that was requested was the ability to semi-automate this for the manager, so we can just set, for instance, the percentage that he wants the newly invested assets to go to. This would probably need to be manually clicked and the gas fee paid for by the manager. Another thing that came up was additional wallet options. Now there's already MetaMask and Wallet Connect, so you can use a variety of mobile wallets. But the one thing that still is missing is Coinbase Wallet, but if I'm not mistaken, that's already being worked on by the developers. And there's also a big request for simplifying the investment process, more specifically to onboard people who are not so comfortable with cryptocurrency and who might not be using MetaMask or other Web3 wallets. So that's something that's definitely going to be looked at. Also the ability to invest with any asset, because it's all of this is theoretically possible with Enzyme. We have something called a shares requester, which is able to convert, hand out shares of a fund to investors at a specific rate. And one thing I'm personally looking forward to a lot is indeed incorporating additional yield farming platforms such as Curve or Alpha Finance, Yearn, etc. Basically anything that can give you an edge as a fund manager to really get the best yields without having to get off Enzyme to do so. One thing that I also want to show, it's not on the slides, but I'll share my screen again. One second. It's the ability to keep track of your investments through Zerion, which was recently also added. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's not showing up on my screen. Let me try again. Yes, that's better. So like one of the big advantages is that when you invest into Enzyme, you get share tokens in return. So for instance, here it's shares in the Alchemy fund, but you also have a whole different range of Enzyme funds. So if you type in Enzyme into the Zerion app, you will get a whole list. So for instance, let me just take a random one. And similar to how the Enzyme terminal works for investing, here you can easily keep track of your portfolio, like also what a manager is doing, the performance, etc. So it might be a good way to keep track of like your assets together with all the other things. So you like have a one-stop shop to take a look at your performance across your wallet. And with this, I think we can go over to some questions by the audience. So you can, I think, raise your hand also if you want to speak up, and then we can unmute you.
I think there are some on the chat, Gilles.
Yeah, I noticed one before, like there is a question. If Uniswap starts a liquidity mining event, what happens to Unifarmed into the fund? The same for Comp, which is the Compound token. So good news for Compound, you can already farm the Comp tokens through Enzyme. Because every time you deposit or withdraw assets in Compound, you earn some of the tokens and they will be distributed to your fund. You might have to enable the Comp token if you don't already hold it in your fund, and you can do so at settings and then go to tracked assets and enable Comp. So you will already like earn more on top of just the lending fees.
I saw a question from Jack about adding assets to the universe. So he said, he asked pretty much any ERC20 with a Chainlink Oracle is integratable, or is it still manual process? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the correct answer is yes. Anything ERC20 with the Chainlink Oracle can be added. The manual process is still there, but it's only a couple days. You said you can, like you were working on adding Hedgig and DPI and a few others.
Yeah, I mean the main restraint, the main kind of restriction is that there's a cost to adding, you know, a token to Chainlink. So ideally, it would be great if projects actually, you know, that wanted to have their tokens available on Enzyme had a Chainlink price feed and sponsored it themselves. But generally speaking, that's the restriction for what we call primitive assets. And then there's this concept, of course, of derivatives, which are assets that derive their value from primitive assets like C tokens, etc. And those tokens can be included as long as we have the primitive price feeds for the underlying assets as well. So that's the limitation we have right now. So it's not, there is a slight manual element to it, into adding them. And that's, but it's a very, you know, it's a very simple kind of couple of hours process. It's not, you know, to add a batch, it's not a large, it's not a lot of work. It's just really about having the price feeds. So we don't need to wait for the next release. You know, we can just add them on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I saw a new question coming just now, but from Richard, how about old world assets like gold, ETFs, stocks, and bonds? I guess the good news is that a lot of that already exists with synthetics. We've got gold, we've got oil, we've got the Nikkei, we've got
Silver,
I think there's some
FTSE,
some Forex. Is there, I guess that will expand as synthetics expands its offering, right? So this kind of goes to what Mona was talking about earlier about how we're not necessarily trying to be the product, but rather the infrastructure. So the more that the DeFi space innovates and builds, the more features Enzyme will be able to use as well. And it becomes this mega aggregator, essentially, that puts everything under one hood.
Yeah, and gold also, we're gonna have, I should have mentioned this actually, we're gonna have wrapped DGLD, which is a gold-backed token. I think it was issued by CoinShares, and that's going to be available soon as well.
Yes, I believe Michael was even on the call, maybe still is. So shout out to the team. Let's see if there's any other questions.
Yeah, there was a question about withdrawing from a fund. So indeed, when you want to take your profit or just want to move your assets back out of it, you can indeed redeem your shares for the underlying assets in the fund. So you will get back a share of your proportional share of all the assets that are in the fund. This is to reduce gas fees and also to prevent some attacks. So you will get just a proportion of all the assets that are in the fund and not the denomination assets. But of course, you can trade it back to whatever you want. Let's check the chat.
Jan asked, can you talk about the bigger funds that are coming to Enzyme? I mean, a few of them have been mentioned in this call. Rari Capital, of course. So Mona, maybe you can talk about it, or correct me if I'm wrong, but they are essentially moving their entire TVL to Enzyme and using Enzyme as the front end, correct?
Yeah, I think they're moving their ETH portion, but it's a big portion also, like to start with.
So yes.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we don't usually talk about the stuff that's coming, and actually very often people just launch stuff without telling us. But Rari is currently public. We're working with a few other partners on launching things. I think that will take a few days to a few weeks, but generally speaking, we'll just announce them when they're there and when they're live.
Right.
No announcement of the announcement.
Exactly.
It's not 2017 anymore. Yeah. But yeah, I think like a lot of like bigger names are also looking into it because it's a big improvement compared to V1. Like a lot of the hurdles have been lifted. There's also a question about the MLN token. The name will remain the same. Well, it's now called like Enzyme Melon token on CoinGecko. So Enzyme brackets MLN. But you don't need to change it. I would also like to warn users because we saw there was a scam going on in Telegram trying to impersonate the Enzyme team to like do a bounty sale or something. They call it, but it's a scam. You don't need to send your MLN or your ETH to any address for the token swap. It's just it will stay as is.
Goes without saying, we'll never ask for your money. That's what smart contracts are for. Is loopring on the agenda? I guess that kind of attacks layer 2 scaling in general. Yeah. I'm not sure if Avantgarde has looked into.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. So I mentioned that in a week and a half, we have this virtual offsite with very, very high percentage of that offsite will be spent on research, and layer 2 is a huge topic there. So we'll be looking, I mean, just off the top of my head, I can remember Loopring is there, Diversify is there, Optimism is there. We're going to be exploring them in detail, but also talking to other DeFi projects on what they're doing. You saw that, I mean, we're interested to hear which direction DEXs are going. Kyber just announced their, I think, V3 plans, and that they're looking closely at L2. So we're talking to them. We're talking to Paraswap. We're talking to all the major DEX players just to understand where the space is going, and doing our own independent research as well. So yeah, I mean, we're very conscious of gas prices as a problem, generally speaking, in DeFi, and we want to bring that down as much as possible. And I would even go as far to say that's a priority that I didn't mention earlier, which I should have mentioned. But I think if I'm realistic, it will probably take, it will definitely take more than 3 months, but we'd like to have a solution, I think 6 to 9 months, which I think is in line with the space in general. Like most people who are talking about layer 2 improvements right now are giving a sort of 1-year timeline. I think that's fair because it's all still very nascent technology, and we're just to say it's really important that it's really good that someone asked that, because it's important that everyone knows we're very focused on that, and we're very conscious of gas prices in trading and absolutely want to bring them down as much as possible.
Right. And I'll also add, like, given the fact that we're an aggregator, we have to be very conscious of like where are the integrations that we're using moving to, because it makes no sense for, let's say, us being on Optimism while the protocols that we use are on ZK or just using other features. So we have to be kind of like using the same infrastructure.
Yeah, and also, I mean, there's certainly, security implications for rushing into layer 2 without carefully thinking it through. And it's something that we put a lot, security in general is something we put a lot of emphasis on.
There's a few questions about Polkadot. Have you looked into possibly Polkadot integrations? He and somebody else said, I remember Polkadot Gavin being an early supporter of Melon.
Yeah, I think Gavin is still a supporter of Melon. I haven't heard otherwise. No, he's definitely him and Parity were early backers of Melon in the early days, and they still are. I speak to them quite regularly, and we're certainly keeping a very close eye on Polkadot. We're close to Polkadot also in a couple of different ways. So other than the fact that we have good relationships with Gavin and Parity, we also have Fabian, who works at Parity full time and is on the Melon Council, the Enzyme Council, and I would say that's definitely something we're interested to explore, but it's probably not going to be something we explore this year. It's probably something that we'll explore towards the end of this year or next year, because it's, again, like we said before, it's all still quite early, and we certainly won't be, at least I don't see us being the first mover to something like Polkadot, because we're very, you can't have asset management without the asset universe, as like so many people have told us in the past, and most of the asset universe still stays on Ethereum.
I agree. And there's also now a question, I don't know if you can talk about that. Any plan to make some kind of competitions to roar the best funds, invest some money in the best funds? Parentheses, D had just doing it, I think.
Yeah, actually, we've had plans to do that for over a year, believe it or not. But we didn't feel that V1 was, the place to do it. Like, we wanted to build something a bit more robust, and we're a lot more robust and a lot easier to use before we start doing something like that. But we're certainly, ready to announce something along those lines quite soon. Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
See if there's any more. Do you guys have any more questions? Let's take a look at the time, because we got like 2 more minutes. So if there's anything you want to hear from Mona herself or from us, let us know. What about making a community call with a focus on legal questions?
It's a good one.
I think if we do that, we should probably have a lawyer on the call.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. And I think also it would be fun to have guest speakers occasionally on the call, especially with protocols that we're thinking of integrating. I'd love to, I'm sure our users would love to hear more from, I don't know how many people in the room, for example, are familiar with Alpha. But it would be great to bring people like that into these calls occasionally to just show us what they're doing and how it could work natively within Enzyme.
Yeah, and I think as kind of the DeFi mega aggregator that Enzyme's slowly becoming, I think we can really become a centerpiece of the whole DeFi ecosystem, where anytime we make an integration, like you said, bring in a guest speaker from that protocol, have them explain, have them show all the features that they have, and then furthermore, of course, while everybody stays, of course, an independent fund manager, and while the council does not take any responsibility or I guess take in the funds, provide as many resources as we can, whether it's like bringing on perhaps speakers that are legal that can give some legal insights or accounting insights, because ultimately I think a lot of the user base is the tail end of perhaps young fund managers, first timers. So at least from a community driven perspective, not from a council driven perspective, I think providing resources will be a big key to help build out this community. Let's see.
And there's one more question about borrowing assets, which is also an interesting one. Because for now, you can, for instance, deposit funds into a compound, but you cannot borrow any. And the way that compound works, it won't be possible, I think, for borrowing to be able to make sense. You would need to tokenize the debt positions. So if a platform tokenizes the debt positions, for instance, in ERC20 tokens, and makes those tokens transferable, then you could enable something like this. Because of course you want the investors to be able to access their money at all times. If it's stuck in another protocol, and if you withdraw the funds and the fund gets liquidated, it's not a fun thing. So I think to make liquid borrowing possible, you would need to have these tokenized depositions in which Aave version 2 comes close, except that these tokens are not transferable. So maybe it's something for Aave 3, or who knows what Uniswap version 3 has on offer. But yeah, I think it's not possible now, but if it's technically possible, I would very much look forward to doing so. So yeah, I see a lot of great feedback of happy users in the chat on V2.
I think that kind of wraps up. Seeing a lot of thank you messages. Well, I think we'll say thanks to you guys. Shout out to everybody who's here. I see Tobias says really cool project. Thanks, guys. Florence says, actually, that was one question. Sven, very nice progress. Congrats, Mona and team. Chris complimenting on the great UI and UX. Florence says, amazing job, guys. Just a few features in the platform will be amazing. Richard says, great work. Jan, good presentation. Felix, GL, and Mona. Cameron, thanks, everyone. Great job. Excited future of Enzyme. Alex, thanks. Good job. Pierre Andrea, thanks. Good luck, guys. You guys are all awesome. Xing, Gordon, Claudia, Jim, thanks for all the nice words. Yeah, this is really just the start. Version 2, I think, is really where it all kicks off. Now the platform has the capability to really serve you guys and make sure that you guys can do the best job you can as fund managers, and really opens the gates to much, much bigger partnerships that will start rolling out, now, as we saw now with the first announcement of Rari. And that's just the beginning, really, because the goal is to make it so seamless that really any single tool that's available in DeFi will ultimately be usable via Enzyme. And when that's the case, we really see it becoming that mega aggregator where people, whether it's investors, your non-crypto native friends and family and whatnot, if they want to invest via fiat on-ramp without ever touching crypto, that's kind of that's the vision of the future, that they can. And that every single, we saw this the past week with Wall Street Bets, that literally, young Redditors are taking down multi-billion-dollar hedge funds. So clearly this is the way of the future, that anybody can manage assets, and sometimes more successfully than the big guys that are literally getting blown up because of over leveraging. And Enzyme provides the infrastructure that anybody, no matter what kind of school you went to or whatever license you had, can manage assets with a transparent track record, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters in finance. So really excited for what the future holds, and appreciate everybody joining today. So I don't know if you have any final words, GL or Mona. Otherwise, I'd say we'll wrap it up here.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll see you next month, I think. We'll do another community call with a guest speaker then. So yeah, have a good evening or afternoon, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.